Hello, folks, and welcome to Got Your Back, NHL, LeBrun, and Rishaug. A doozy of a podcast on the way today. The man making all the headlines, Canucks General Manager Patrik Allvin, in conversation with Pierre and I on today's podcast. We'll also break down some other happenings around the National Hockey League. Got Your Back, brought to you by Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, where they provide equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. What sets them apart, though? Their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. It means the world to them. I know that because I've been to the head office. They actually have it plastered on the walls at Cross Country Canada. Get her done. They'll bend over backwards for their clientele. Whatever they need, when they need it, no excuses. They take great pride in that attitude, and we are very proud to have Cross Country Canada as our title sponsor here on Got Your Back, LeBrun and Rishaug. As we say hello to Monsieur LeBrun, Pierre, it was an active night last night. Breaking news happens. You spring into action. We spring into action. It's kind of the first big one of the year, and it gets the juices flowing a little, doesn't it?
Well, and there may not be many bigger ones. There might be some that are equivalent, but, you know, Bo Horvat was the top name on most trade boards, right? And for a reason, captain of the Canucks, having a career year. And also because he's on a expiring deal, a very, very good chance that he was going to be moved unless there was a last-minute extension. And that never came close to happening, by the way. You know, once that last offer was, offered and rejected, I think in early December, that was pretty much it. It was all about trading Bo Horvat. Yeah,
for sure. So, reaction to the deal. The question that always comes when a player of that caliber gets traded is, did they get enough? And we've listened to both sides reason through why they did it, when they did it, to a degree. What's your sense, Pierre, on the return that the Vancouver Canucks got and the way that it fits into the trajectory that they're facing right now?
Yeah, so I think you have to start with the premise that you have to treat Bo Horvat as a rental player in the moment, because whether or not he ends up signing an extension with the Islanders was never guaranteed as part of this process. So therefore, I think you have to analyze this as not a hockey deal, but a rental deal in terms of what the Canucks got back. And from that perspective, in texting other front office people around the NHL over the last 24 hours, they feel like the Canucks did decent here. Again, because it's a player that isn't guaranteed to be with his new team past the end of the season. Now, we'll get to that in a second. I have a feeling there's a chance that he does sign at some point, but he's a rental player in the moment. And I think from that perspective, given that you got an NHL player in Beauvillier, granted a winger, not a center, and certainly a prospect in Ratu that has promise, could he be a second-line player eventually? And, of course, the first-round pick might be the gem of them all. Whether it's a first-round pick this summer, which would be mid-range, that would mean that the Islanders weren't picking top 12, or an unprotected pick next year, Ryan, right, which I think is the real interesting part of this deal for Vancouver. Yeah. I think they did all right, given – I'm not going to say they did great, but I think they did all right, given the circumstances.
A lot lies in that pick. Evaluating this trade lies in who they pick, how their scouting staff does, what kind of an impact that player can eventually have. Okay, we're going to get to our interview with Patrik Allvin. That's our Who's Got Your Back segment, brought to you by Liberty Smart Security. It's a company that specializes in having your back. High-quality, advanced smart security systems for your home or your business. They use leading-edge technology to protect the things that you value most in your life. Your home is your castle. Protect it with Liberty Smart Security. Visit libertysecurity.ca. We should let people know a bit of a funny moment in this interview with Patrik Allvin because you disappeared, Pierre. You all of a sudden went poof. And I asked him a question because I think a lot of people are wondering, why wouldn't the Canucks let him negotiate with other teams before he made that deal, right? The conventional wisdom is if they can negotiate an extension, maybe you get more for him. We'll talk about that strategy after, but you disappeared right before I asked that question. And then you popped back up, didn't know I'd asked it. And then you asked it again. Now, the thing that was funny about it is he didn't really give me much of an answer. He said he didn't want to talk about it really. And then you asked him and he gave you an answer. So I don't know what that says about me and you.
Well, I guess he figured we were like a dog on a bone and wouldn't let that aspect go. And listen, you said conventional wisdom. Yes and no. I mean, I think that, some teams would have preferred to let Newport Sports, Pat Morris, negotiate an extension as part of this to get more in return. Yes. But I have talked to a lot of teams in the last several years who have been in the exact same position as Vancouver, who decided not to allow the agent to be involved because they feel that the agent kind of hijacks the trade process, and now it suddenly becomes a team, just a team that the agent and the player are looking at, as opposed to, you know, the Canucks being able to play the whole field, if that makes any sense. So it's not a no-brainer, but it's certainly something that teams have dealt with in different ways.
All right, that and much more covered in our interview with Canucks General Manager Patrik Allvin, courtesy Liberty Smart Security. So there's a number of different directions we can take this interview right off the start here, Patrik, but I'm sort of going back to my journalism professor, and he said never ignore the obvious. So the first thing I'll ask you is, do you have any more trades to tell us about today?
It's still early out here in Vancouver, right? Yeah. We'll see what the day has. But you know what? It's been a lot of conversations with different teams, and we're still 5 weeks away from the deadline, I guess, and a lot of things can happen here.
So a big trade that you made yesterday, and after a trade like that happens, Patrik, there's all kinds of reaction, right? There's the media reaction, there's the fan base reaction, there's other fan bases reacting within your team internally. I wonder, in the 24 hours or so after you do a deal like that, what reactions do you pay most attention to? Do you think matter?
Well, first, reaching out to the players involved in the deal. I think that's important, especially here, longtime captain Bo Horvat, being here for 9 years and played really well for the Canucks and being a great leader in the community and on and off the ice. So that was a hard, tough, one of my tougher calls to make so far in my tenure here with the Vancouver Canucks. And then the next step was to reach out to Beauvillier and Ratty and welcome them to the organization and making sure we taking care of them and communicating in the right way and giving them all the information.
You know, one thing that I always find fascinating over the years, Patrik, and I don't know that there's really a hard, fast rule. That's why it's interesting to debate, is the idea of, you know, pulling the trigger when you have something you like that's on the table, but you're, you know, just under 5 weeks out. You know, does the offer get worse? Does the offer get better? It's impossible to know, really. So can you walk us through the idea that you decided to act this early on a trade that obviously could have gone right to March 3rd?
Well, again, I think I touched on it at the press conference here yesterday. When I got in here a year ago, starting to evaluate what we had, my job was to remake and restructure the organization. Part of it was evaluating our team and talking to other teams, you know, leading up to basically to yesterday when we pulled the trigger. And gathering the information and who might have interest in our players and to what degree. And, you know, I rely a lot on Jim Rutherford's expertise, being around the league for so long and, you know, being very successful general manager. So I think we felt really comfortable with the return at this point and not risking missing out on a deal or a player getting injured.
Patrik, one of the from a strategic standpoint, and I'm not sure how deep you'll want to get into this, but you know, there is a school of thought that if you allow teams to talk to the player about his future and potentially a contract and that sort of thing, that maybe it adjusts the return and it can be a little bit better. But that strategy can also backfire on you as well. So I wonder, you know, you guys, it's been reported, made the decision not to allow teams to have those discussions, and what went into that decision?
I don't want to talk, you know, specific business communications here and what we did or what we didn't do here. I think that stays between the clubs that were involved and the players that were involved. So obviously it's different ways you can handle things, and we decided that in order for us to get the best return here as we did yesterday, we felt comfortable with the process that we had leading up to this point.
Bo Horvat is he was a big piece in that locker room, on the ice, off the ice, from a leadership standpoint. As you evaluate your group, Patrik, how do you feel about the leadership that is there now, that exists, and potentially who can fill that void and help to fill that void? Who will help control the temperature in that room?
Yeah, I mean that's part of when I get in here to evaluate the players and the group we had here, and Bo has been here for starting his 9th season here, and he made a playoff his first year, and they went to the bubble there as well, but it's been some tough years for this club since Bo became the captain, and part of it was that we looking to obviously to change things up here and trying to go a different direction. And I do think there is a lot of young players here that are capable of stepping up, and Peterson had a really good season up to this point, and Quinn Hughes has been playing really well, and there is plenty of other guys in that dressing room downstairs now that need to grow into this leadership role. And I trust and believe in our coaching staff here that with their experience that they will help and guide the next captain of the team whenever we decide who that will be.
But Patrik, you've got other players that obviously teams are phoning on. One of them, no doubt, is Luke Schenn, who, by virtue of his contract expiring on July 1st, I know he's a popular guy in your dressing room. He's also a popular target for playoff teams because of his physical style on the back end. We've seen those guys get picked up the last couple of years. When you think, for example, of a David Savard getting traded a couple of years ago. Where do you see the future lying with Luke Schenn in terms of your decision making?
Again, I do have a lot of respect for Luke as a player and as a person, and he's been a great leader, character guy that is a true pro in this league. No doubt about that he would help a contending team with his physicality and his experience winning cups. We'll see where it goes. I met with Luke. I know how much he respect and like to be here in Vancouver. So we'll see where it goes.
In terms of the market, and I know it's a bit of a game of chicken some years, I would imagine, figuring out when the market's going to be at its best, and it probably changes for different players. Brock Besser's name has also been out there a fair amount. Do you sense this year that as the market draws closer, prices potentially could increase a little bit, or do you think that it's a bit of an unpredictable year just given the cap and given the way the standings are and such? What's your read on the market?
It's a tough one. It's a good question because I would say it is hard here with a kind of a flat cap and it's hard to predict. It seems to be money in, money out. A lot of those deals, there is not that many teams that have cap space. So it's really hard to make a deal. Definitely it's hard to predict here over the next couple of weeks.
And just a quick follow-up on that. In a year where there's a player like Connor Bedard that's available in the draft potentially for the team that gets that opportunity, does it affect your thought process on timing at all, Patrik, in terms of when you make the decision, okay, we're going to be in assets out, build for the future team, and the sooner you move some of these assets out, it just increases your chances. And it's in no way is it tanking. It's just simply a matter of asset management. And does that affect your timing?
Yes and no. I mean, we're 27th in the league in the right now. We're not happy with our season. We need to get better. I mean, the player you mentioned, Connor Bedard, is obviously a Vancouver kid. I don't know if our scouts have him number 1 or number 2 or number 3. We'll see when it comes down.
Keeping that draft list close, eh? Keeping it close to your chest.
We'll see. But my understanding and watching a couple of amateur games here and talking to our scouts, it definitely seems like it is a pretty good draft.
Yeah, no question about that. And you got two first round picks potentially now. We'll see if that's a first round pick from the Islanders this year or next. One last thing I want to ask in the Bo Horvat negotiation, because it's obviously a fascinating and difficult thing to pull off. Was there a thought at some point? I mean, teams have handled this differently with a player like Bo over the years. Some front offices have done it exactly like you guys did, which is, trade him as a rental, and it's up to the team that trades for him to figure out the future, right? And that's what transpired here with the Islanders. Whether or not they can sign Bo Horvat, that's their issue. It's not yours. Other teams in this position have allowed the agent to interact directly with teams to maybe sign him as part of the process. And that didn't happen here. What kind of difficulty was that in deciding which way to go on this one? Because as I've said, teams have done it both ways.
Yeah. I mean, original thoughts was to keep Bo Horvat here. That was our plan. And, again, respect Bo that he put himself in a position to be a UFA and with that dictating where he wants to play and how much money he wants to make. At this point, we felt that the process was moving along, and we felt that the way we handle it, regarding if the agent was involved or not, we were really happy with this deal we made yesterday.
So, from the standpoint of timeline, and I know you guys, you have a plan in place for how to push this thing in the right direction. If the fan base is wanting an understanding of a timeline that management is working with, what would you say to fans about, there's a certain amount of patience that's involved. I live and work here in Edmonton. I've seen it firsthand. What kind of a timeline would you tell fans that you guys are working on, and what level of patience is going to be required?
It's interesting in the league with 32 teams here that the timeline is it's changing with more teams coming in and teams are getting better. The parity of the league, I think there is we have good pieces here, no doubt about it. And since Jim and I got in here, we can have said that we want to try to acquire younger players and continue to build and put a foundation in place here by drafting and development and signing college European free agents and step by step becoming a better team. Again, I think the culture and the standard needed to raise here too. The belief in being good and giving the players resources to become the best version of themselves. Having a stronger development staff, adding Jeremy Colleton to our Abbotsford group, having the Sedins working with the players up in Vancouver and down in Abbotsford. I think that's just going to set us up for success here. We have some young players coming in. We need more players coming in to create that internal competition here. But again, I'm excited with the new coaching staff with Rick Tocchet, Adam Foote, and Sergei Gonsha, what they brings and how we want to create their identity as a club here moving forward.
And last question for me, Patrik. We quickly mentioned Besser, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask for an update there, only because that situation has kind of played out pretty publicly with the agent acknowledging that he has your permission to talk to teams. But of course, it's not a player that you have to trade by March 3rd either. He could very much still be on your team. So how would you handicap where that situation is at right now?
Well, again, I think Brock has went through a lot over the last 6 months. He got injured in training camp and struggled a little bit coming back. But I would say the last 10 games, I've seen him playing much better hockey. He's still 25 years old, capable of scoring 25 to 30 goals. I think the way we're going to play here now would push him a little bit harder, and hopefully he will be able to find his game back here. And again, I'm not, you know, pushing him out of Vancouver. He's a great kid, great person, and we strongly believe that he's a good player here for us moving forward. So we'll see, what the market and what other teams, have interest or not in our players.
Sorry to interrupt you there. You talked about some of the great young core pieces that you have. And in terms of this major surgery, whatever we want to call it, would you say that the core of your team is in place and somewhat untouchable when you talk about the Petterssons and the Hughes, and we'll throw Demko in there as well? Like, do you think you're done moving major pieces? And we'll see which way, acknowledging Brock Besser's role on the team, but do you think the major moving of pieces is done, Patrik, in terms of this?
It's hard to say. I mean, again, we're sitting in the bottom of the league here, so obviously we haven't been good enough. I think a major change here was when we brought in Rick Tocchet and his group here, and want to create, as I said, the identity. I've been missing a little bit of the identity of our team. I think we've been very inconsistent and hard to tell game in and game out what we are. In terms of those players you mentioned, I mean, they are high elite players in the league, and for us, I mean, you need something significant in return to even consider moving one of those pieces. They are still young, perfect age, and I believe they have a great future in the National Hockey League.
Well, I imagine you'll learn a lot about a lot of other members of your team in the days and weeks that follow after a trade like this. That's part of the evaluation, I imagine, in that search for identity in the wake of a trade like this.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Patrik, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We know how busy you've been, and best of luck between now and the trade deadline and the rest of the way.
Thanks, guys. Good luck, you guys, too, here leading up to the trading deadline.
Thanks.
Well, Taksamuke, Patrik, and sorry my Wi-Fi cut out for a moment there, so I hope I didn't miss anything too headline grabbing.
Okay.
All right, take care. Thanks. All right, and we thank Patrik Allvin for taking the time to chat with us. Well, Pierre, no trades happening in the moment imminently. What did you make of his last answer there when I asked him about the other core pieces and thinking about the Hughes and Pettersson and Demko? Because Demko's name did kind of pop up a little bit yesterday. I thought I heard Farhan maybe even mention it at one point. What did you make of his answer on that one?
I mean, I think that the answer is there's still a lot of work to be done here, which I don't necessarily mean. I don't know that it means that he would ever trade some of those guys you mentioned, but I think he has to leave that answer open-ended, because I think in reality, even behind closed doors, it is open-ended. As Jim Rutherford's words were, major surgery. And so I think the Canucks will continue to take calls, perhaps even more so this summer than between now and March 3rd in terms of another big move. There could be other moves before March 3rd, of course. Luke Schenn's a possibility. We'll see what happens with Brock Besser. But I think the answer was quite forthright from Allvin, Ryan. I think what he's saying is, hey, look where we are in the standings. How could we feel that we've done most of the work? They haven't. More to come.
He also took that answer down the path of culture too. And I think he is going to learn a lot about his team here in the weeks that follow, because there's a huge leadership vacuum in that room. Like, you talk to people that were around this team every day, the number of things that Bo Horvat took care of, the way he controlled the temperature off the ice in a lot of ways. Vancouver, that media group, I mean, it's much like here at Edmonton. Out there in Toronto, it's demanding. And there's a lot that needs to be taken care of there as well. So who is going to take care of this stuff? Who steps in? They'll share it, I'm sure, but you need that presence. And right now, I'm not sure that they have that obvious candidate.
I mean, they may have it for the rest of the year in a guy like Luke Schenn, but it can't be his team because it has to be a core player who takes over, right? So, you're looking at Pettersson or Hughes, I think, as guys that are growing older, more mature, more comfortable in their skin, right? And so I think those are the obvious candidates. But, and for that reason alone, that's why I asked him about Schenn, Ryan, because I think it's probable that he gets dealt because he's a UFA at the end of the year. But what if at the last moment the Canucks just check with him and check with the agent, Ben Hankinson, and say, would you do a little extension here for the leadership part of it? Just going back to your question here. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think it's interesting that Allvin said he has talked to Luke Schenn, and wonder what was part of that conversation.
No matter major or minor surgery, bottom line, you need players that can play. You need guys that can show the way. And Schenn definitely displaying himself to be one of those guys. That's why he's highly sought after on the trade market. I mean, he'd be a good ad for a lot of teams that feel like they have a chance to go deep and want to add that depth and leadership and experience. And he ticks a lot of boxes, man, as a deadline acquisition.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those big physical blue liners that, over an 82-game season, we don't like talking about those guys a lot because it's all about skill and speed and scoring. And then you get to the playoffs. You think of the Habs run in 21, improbable run to the Cup final. Edmondson, Petrie, Weber, Sherratt, the big trees on defense for Montreal. Suddenly the rule book's a little different in the playoffs, and it's about physical play. You think about Tampa going out to get David Savard a couple of years ago. You think about Colorado going out to get Josh Manson before the deadline last year. There's a bit of a old school trend coming back here, I feel like, over the last few years, which is that you need some big trees on the fence in the playoffs in combination with your skill, obviously, back there. And that's why a guy like Schenn, I think, listen, I can say comfortably that I believe Boston has shown interest in Luke Schenn, have contacted the Canucks. I believe Tampa Bay Lightning have. And I'd be surprised, quite frankly, if we didn't go through all the teams sitting in the playoff spot, if half of them haven't at least called Vancouver and said, let us know when you decide what you do with Luke Schenn.
Wonder on the Edmonton Oilers, too. They're looking more on the other side, but, they're pretty heavy over on that side, but could potentially, if they don't end up getting what they're looking for on the left side, could be a fallback position for them as well. They've got some guys that they can move over. Okay, a couple of other things we want to get to in the breakdown today. Brought to you by Pro Hockey Life, and the drive towards the playoffs is on big time, so no better time to outfit yourself with gear from your favorite team, and Pro Hockey Life is the place to go for your team's apparel, their sweater. You can get all sorts of other things to support your group. They got a great wall full of hats. They've got all sorts of different things for the huge hockey fan in your life. Like you, like us, Pro Hockey Life is obsessed with the game, 16 locations across the country. So let's keep it on the topic of trades, Pierre. A big deal gets done a month out. And so I wonder, people want to know, does this jar the market? Does it shake some things loose? Do other teams take notice? And as much as James Duthie would hate it, is there a chance that this, and we ask it every time the first trade happens, but does this shake things loose a little bit, do you think?
I hope it does, because unlike James Duthie, I like when every big name keeps going before deadline.
You got columns to write.
Another check mark off my list, exactly. So let's think about some teams that we've confirmed that showed some interest in Horvat. A lot of teams did, but let's just pick on a few. The Rangers kicked the tires, but at the end of the day, the Rangers are way more focused on wing than center. So I'm not surprised that they didn't go deeper. But what does it mean for New York now in the sense of this? A price has been paid now for a big-time rental, a rental for now, Bo Horvat. What does that mean if the Rangers can look at Patrick Kane, if Kane wants to wait? What's the price there, etc.? Carolina spoke to Vancouver a few times on Bo Horvat. Carolina was only going to get in it if they could sign Horvat, I think. So what does that mean for them? Remember, they got the Max Pacioretty cap to play with now. So, again, I still think Carolina is that team that would rather have a guy that plays with them past this year, right, as opposed to pay a big premium for a rental. So do they try on Tarasenko or Riley, or do they focus a little more on Timo Meier? That's interesting there. The Leafs, I think, have talked internally about a top six winger. The Devils, Tom Fitzgerald, I quoted on the record in my piece last week, wants a top six winger. So I think getting a big name like Horvat off the market, even though he's a center, not a winger, I think helps clarify both the original price paid here on this year's market for a big name, and B, I think for sure gives some juice to those phone calls, even if it doesn't mean it happens right away.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see. There was a suggestion made yesterday. I know you addressed it in your article a little bit here, but does the timing of this allow Lou Lamoriello to sort of read see how this goes over the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks before the trade deadline. If his team is not in a playoff position towards deadline, and it's pretty unclear as to whether they're going to get there or not, I know it goes against the way he normally operates, but is there a chance he could turn around and flip him again? I mean, he's given himself a window of a month by doing this early to see which way it goes.
I mean, obviously that's an option. I will tell you, both from listening to him on his media call last night and from talking to other people in and around that situation, he traded for Bo Horvat to sign him.
Right. But what if they don't like what they're hearing? What if the negotiations start and they go, oh, this is why Vancouver wouldn't let us talk to him? Because look at these numbers. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible, but as you said, Lamoriello has an interesting history when it comes to pending UFAs. I remember way back in New Jersey when Scott Niedermayer was pending UFA and seemingly was giving every sign that he might want to go to market. And as we know, he ended up going to Anaheim to play with his brother.
Yeah.
You know, the Devils never traded him. Lamoriello didn't trade John Tavares either in his UFA year. So...
but maybe the difference, Pierre, maybe the difference is they had squeezed a lot of great juice out of those guys for their organization before that decision time came, right? If they actually think there's a chance they can't get a deal done, I mean, they just gave up a good pile of assets for him and the idea of being able to recoup some.
Yeah. And I should be clear because I think actually Lamoriello didn't take over until after that season Tavares was up, but he still had time to deal with it is what I mean. And I remember there was the suggestion that the Leafs could maybe do the old sign and trade to get Tavares on 8 years instead of 7, and Lamoriello wanted no part of that. I don't see it. I understand why you guys talked about that on the pod last night because it's obviously interesting and it's possible. But I think once Lou Lamoriello puts his thought process on for an acquisition. My point is this. He didn't just trade for Bo Horvat to get back in this playoff race. I think he traded for Bo Horvat for the long term. Mm-hmm. Like he advanced the summer to now and made a move, but now he's got to go and sign him.
Teams have a funny way of somehow getting a sense for what a guy might be worth or what a guy might be looking for too, right? I can't imagine that Lamoriello makes this deal without a pretty darn good idea what the ballpark is and how it fits and if it makes sense. A couple of other items. NHL All-Star is coming up, and news out of Edmonton this week that Connor McDavid is going to take a pass on the fastest skater. Listen, he's done this a bunch of times. Don't believe he did it in the team skills competition this year. Won it, I think 3 straight years he ended up winning it. But it's one of those things, Pierre, where, I don't know, it kind of runs its course a little bit. What do you think of McDavid sidestepping fastest skater this year? I don't have an issue with it. I think he's kind of done his time in that event.
I think, how many years have you known me?
Yeah.
Are you really asking me an NHL All-Star question?
I am. It's the quiz master.
It's
on his
list. I'd rather eat a pencil than give any serious thought about I don't even know what the events are. I couldn't believe after the Horvat trade, one of the hot topics in social media was Horvat still play for I don't even know what the format is, but he still play for what? For the Pacific or who cares? I mean, come on.
So you're saying your flight's booked and you're going
1 second of NHL All-Star weekend.
All right. Note to the quiz master. No more All-Star topics for Pierre.
Cancel that weekend altogether.
Okay, that's on the list there. Jack Hughes. So, listen, the New Jersey Devils were maybe one of those teams we thought could be in and around the Bo Horvat conversation. Jack Hughes, the highest scorer in the new year here. He's got 33 goals this season, 63 points. He had 26 goals all of last year, Pierre. The extent to which he's taken his goal scoring to another level. Look at the ratio of goals to assists. 33 goals and 30 assists this year. Last year, he was 26 and 30, but it's just, man, did you think he would be this good, this fast?
I mean, I can't say that I thought that for sure. I think what's interesting, though, is I was thinking about it as soon as he signed that extension a year out before he could sign it, 8 times 8, remember? Mm-hmm. And there were people saying, holy jumping, talk about, trying to get ahead of this. That deal's already a bargain. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's the number one center. It's going to finish among the league leading scorers, and health permitting, that's probably going to happen now for several years. And they got him at $8 million a year. They were right. to take that gamble in his case, because this is what they felt was about to happen. And remember, right after he signed, he got hurt too.
Yeah.
So they felt he was just starting to pop when he signed that last year, and then he got injured. But he's a special player, and you want to talk about a team that's set down the middle with Nico Hischier right behind him, and this is why they're looking for a winger to complement that group. They're a fascinating team on the rise. The fly in the ointment in their team building, it's not anyone's fault, but it's just unfinished work, is what's going to happen with Jesper Bratt. That negotiation, from all accounts, did not go well last summer.
Right.
Which is why he's up again at the end of the year here. And it basically, I think, boils down to this, Ryan, which is that I think his camp wanted north of 8 last summer. And there's a guy, like I just said, making 8 on their team up front, in Jack Hughes. And I think the idea is that I think the team would love to slot him between Hischier 7.25 and Hughes' 8 somewhere, because they love Bratt. They want him to be part of this core for many years. But the reason it's fascinating is that I think they need a good idea about where this is headed with Bratt, don't you think, before they perhaps commit to making a hockey deal for another top 6 winger?
Yeah, it's a good point.
You got to start to know what the puzzle is here all around. So they're a fascinating team for me that way.
Take care of your own business before you go make those big moves that could shift things for you moving forward. How much fun is the race for the wild card in the East going to be? I mean, I'm looking at the standings here. You've got Washington right there. Pittsburgh is right there. The Buffalo Sabres. I mean, what a story they've been. What a fun team they are to watch. Just fun. And then you got Lou Lamoriello saying, yeah, don't forget about us, right? Sitting 55 points right now, a couple points back here, but still very much in the mix.
Florida's not going to give up.
Florida Panthers are not going to buckle on this thing. It's going to be entertaining. What do you think? I don't know. I'll put you on the spot. Who's going to get there, buddy? What do you think?
I think the Sabres get in. And one of Pittsburgh or Washington, these two terrific aging cores who have been unbelievable forever, I think one of them trips up and misses out. Another team you didn't mention, because they really are on the outskirts of that race you just talked about, but I think the Ottawa Senators, not that they have that much to sell in terms of pending UFA. I mean, there's Cam Talbot, there's Holden, there's Hamonic, but in general, I think my sense of that situation is GM Pierre Dorion is in no hurry to sell. That I think he wants to give that team the longest track possible to try and get back in this race. I think it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
But I think the point here, Ryan, is that he wants his team to get to March and at least play some games to have some level of meaning, even if it doesn't mean a playoff spot. So because of that, I wouldn't be surprised, Ryan, if the Senators wait till the very last minute on whether or not they're selling.
Just to keep it competitive. I mean, they've won 3 in a row here. They're going to have to pile a bunch of wins together to really meaningfully get back into it. But they're one of those teams that's too far kind of out of the Bedard situation. And that'll be interesting to see. Okay, Pierre, before we go today, we do need to acknowledge the passing of a pretty significant figure in the game. And listen, polarizing because his persona on the ice and in the game so dramatically different than, off the ice and in his personal life and what that reality was. But on the ice, there's no denying, right? The Golden Jet, Bobby Hull's a 2-time Hart Trophy winner, 3-time scoring champion, 61 Cup winner as well, and just a transitional figure in the game in a lot of ways. You think about the evolution of the curved stick, the move he made over to the WHA, the $1 million contract, just a really big figure in the game and a transitional figure, Pierre. But at the same time, there was a lot off the ice that was just in such contrast to the persona that he put out there, publicly in and around the game, right? There were the allegations from multiple spouses of domestic abuse and, some trouble with the law, pled guilty to assaulting an officer, some comments that were viewed as anti-Semitic made in a Russian newspaper. It was a pretty stark contrast with this man on and off the ice.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I was watching from afar on social media as people were taking their stab at that story, and it's interesting. I actually think that the discourse kind of went along the way it probably should for the most part, which is that it's okay to acknowledge the greatness on the ice while at the same time not ignoring the real troubling and unacceptable behavior off of it. And you shouldn't ignore it. You should not ignore that, because you're going back to the ESPN documentary in 2002, I think it was, the domestic abuse, the accounts of that, completely unacceptable. But you can have both conversations in one, even on the day that a hockey legend dies, because that's just the reality of it. Gone are the days where you don't bring that up, which perhaps might have been the case 30 years ago. But so it was interesting to see how people dealt with that. But the bottom line is, a legend on the ice, and a lot of complexity and unacceptable behavior off of it. That's just the reality of it.
610 goals, 1,063 games played. The Golden Jet, Bobby Hull. Our condolences go out to his family and his friends. That'll wrap up the podcast today. Thanks, Pierre. I know you got to hustle over to Sports Center. You're going to be on a couple of sets today. What you got Sports Center?
A little insider trading, buddy. Yeah.
Little insider trading tonight. We'll look for that on. And what have you? So you wrote Lou Lamoriello in The Athletic. What else you got coming? Can you tell us?
Can't tell you yet, buddy.
Oh man,
Can't
even
tell
me.
you yet. Working
Just
on
between
a few
us.
things.
Come on, what do you got cooking, buddy? What do you got cooking?
I'll
Nothing.
let you know.
You have
I'll
secrets.
let you know.
Oh man, you save your best stuff for insider trading. We need to have a discussion about prioritizing the pod.
I do. I'm doing it right now, buddy.
I know. All right. Love you, buddy. Thank you so much for this. We'll talk to you again real soon. That is the great Pierre LeBrun. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. That'll wrap up today's Got Your Back. NHL, LeBrun, and Rishaug. Big thanks to Patrik Allvin and the Vancouver Canucks for making him available. And to our sponsors as well. Cross Country Canada, Supplies and Rentals, Pro Hockey Life, and Liberty Smart Security. We'll check in next week. Have yourselves a fabulous finish to your week, folks. Cheers. We want to tell you about a truly Canadian company. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals provides equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. I've been to the offices. I've seen how they proudly display that on the wall at each branch. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they'll never let their customers down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. They don't make excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and they truly believe that the success of their customer is their success. You can't get much more Canadian than that.